James Madison loses defensive lineman Jalen Green to a season-ending injury. It's a Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Dave Schultz back on another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, we'll get into the awful news of what JMU went through today. And at the end of their very impressive win over Georgia State, I did not have that one right. App State with an easy win, hasn't had too many of those as of late, if at any at all this year. And the Fighting Will Halls all of a sudden turning things around. They're coming to me to play the Raging Cajuns on Thursday. But first, let's talk about the bad news. Usually we're just going to recap the games we didn't do in yesterday's episode. And JMU with a really impressive 42-14 victory. It was a 7-7 ball game after one, and then all JMU after that, 14-7 at halftime, and then running away from Georgia State 42-14. Darren Granger, 82 yards, 103 on the ground and 2 touchdowns. Marcus Carroll, among the conference's, leading rusher and the nation's leading rushers, only had 33 yards. So JMU's rush defense came to play. But unfortunately, they do lose defensive lineman Jalen Green. Leads the nation in tackles for loss, has 15.5 sacks, nation's leader in that as well. And that could be a huge loss. Reading Shane Metlin's story today from the Daily News Record, they are starting to fall by the wayside for JMU. Again, it's not always the best team that wins, but it tends to be the healthiest team that wins. We'll see if JMU can survive this. And obviously, it's an opportunity for someone else, but tough to replace a Jalen Green, if not impossible. I mean, that's just not going to happen. 15.5 sacks in 9 ball games. Now, I happen to think I'm maybe one of the idiots that thinks sacks tend to be an overrated stat. You can have less than 1 a game in the pros, and you're an all-pro. And depending on when you have it, it may not mean anything at all, right? If you sack somebody and they score a touchdown on that drive anyways, who cares? So I'm not the biggest believer in the sack stat, but in this case, Jalen Green was dominating, right? He had a huge game against Marshall earlier in the year. And again, 15.5 sacks is almost 2 sacks a game. And that doesn't even count the, quarterback hurries, throwaways, stuff like that. So he's having a great year. I think now the big thing is he going to be able to do anything for, to get ready for, pro ball? I presume, if he's out and he has to have knee surgery, although Shane doesn't exactly say what the injury is, would he be able to participate in, Senior Bowl type festivities and All-Star games? Probably not. It is 1, 2, 3 months away, so most likely not with the knee injury. But scouts have been coming around, so hopefully, he will get his shot to play pro ball. But again, you slip a couple of rounds, unfortunately, and that could be a problem. He may not even be ready, depending on what the injury is. He may not even be ready to play at the beginning of training camp, depending on what the injury is. We do not know that. All right, let's get back to the JMU win over Georgia State. I thought Georgia State would play better. And it was JMU who had not played particularly well as of late, right? Jalen Green and the defense did really well against Marshall. And again, Kurt Cignetti probably a little conservative in that ball game, knowing that, without Rasheen Ali, Marshall could not move the ball. So, we can play it close to the vest, and they did. And they won that ball game with Marshall not doing anything offensively. Their points came from a safety and kickoff return. And then they struggled against ODU, right? The defense was a no-show for most of the game and then came up with a big, relatively speaking, goal line stand with about 11 minutes to go, as ODU had a 1st and goal from the 4 and had to settle for a field goal instead of the potential touchdown and go-ahead extra point. And never really got another chance to get in scoring position to maybe tie up the game. And so Georgia State, on the other hand, they were looking forward to coming home, but I think they had come off a bad loss against Georgia Southern. But they had a couple extra days. They're playing at home. You know they're going to be jacked up to play JMU, and they were for a bit. They absolutely were, right? It was 7-7 at the end of one and just 14-7, going into half. And, all James Madison in the second half. 28-7 in the second half. Jordan McLeod, who probably is now your leading candidate in, the offensive player of the year for the Sun Belt. He's probably taken over for Darren Granger, a little bit more consistent. McLeod, 28-36, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Throw in 104 yards on the ground on 13 carries and 2 touchdowns. And you get what I mean when I say he's probably the leader in the clubhouse for the Sun Belt offensive player of the year. So, good job by JMU. They're 9-0, 6-0 in the conference. They get UConn. Let's see what that line is. That may be, we have a line on that. That's 25.5. I would not be surprised if JMU does that one. It is in Harrisonburg compared to going up to the Hartford area. So that is, they host UConn, they host App State, and then the final ball game will be at Coastal Carolina, as the Chanticleers will look for some revenge for last year's regular season ball game. But, certainly the next 2 are relatively winnable ball games. We'll see what App State does. They did have a good week against Marshall. We will talk about that next. So we'll do that. We'll come back and talk about App State. We will still talk about Southern Miss. Had a nice win over ULM, and they're coming to Lafayette on a short week to take on the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. Let's tell you about FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Did not do well betting this weekend. There were some obvious games, and I know it's after the fact, but I get people talking me out of these things. Like I had the Oregon one, didn't use that. I had the Louisville one. People were like Virginia Tech, and I'm like, no, Syracuse is bad. Don't take that into account. And there was another one that would have been good. Ohio State actually covered. Oh, UNLV would have been a good one. UNLV, they covered. So again, I don't need the like the Alabama LSU ball game. I mean, obviously Alabama covered, and I'm sure a lot of people did well with that. But I thought LSU was going to win, and so I didn't bet on that one because I don't bet on Alabama LSU ball games because usually I only bet on the ones where I think it's a mismatch. Turns out that ball game was a mismatch. So I think I did see a friend though win a lot of money on a 7-pick parlay on betting $13. So you can have some fun with it, and you never know when one of these parlays are going to hit. So dive into that on FanDuel. All right, Dave Schultz, Lockdown Sunbelt, your team every day. App State with an easy win over the Marshall Thundering Herd, 31-9. Joey Aguilar could be up for that, offensive player of the year as well. He won't win it because App State's 5-4 and JMU is undefeated, but for a kid who wasn't supposed to be the starting quarterback, he's had a really good year. 20 of 27, 229 yards on Saturday with 3 touchdowns. Also ran 10 times for 44 yards. He's had a fantastic season. He's got 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, almost 2,400 yards, completion percentage of 63.5%. He has been fantastic for App State. Got him going with a 21-point second quarter, and they kind of went from there in what was, again, an easy 31-9 win for App State. Marshall continues to be in a free fall. They have lost their last 5, and it just seems to be getting worse. The defense has been a question mark for most of the season. The offense had been coming through, but now that's not happening either. They had a grand total of 257 yards. Cam Fancher, 14 for 2,544 yards, does have a touchdown, but 3 interceptions. Rasheen Ali, 13 carries and 74 yards. And it's just the season has gone in the wrong direction for the Marshall Thundering Herd. That is for sure. App State is 3-2 in the East. They are right behind Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern they're both a half a game behind Coastal Carolina. They're 4-2. Georgia Southern and App State are 3-2. But App State still has Georgia Southern, but they've lost to Coastal. Well, it's going to be tough to finish right behind James Madison if you are App State. And Old Dominion is dead last in the East. Talk about not seeing that one coming. Thought they had a shot at winning the East. They are 4-5 overall, battling for a bowl berth. Still an outside shot of that, but things were going to have to turn around quickly for the Thundering Herd. They get Georgia Southern. That's on the NFL Network on Saturday. They're at South Alabama. Who knows what's going to happen in that ball game? No one can explain what's going on with South Alabama. And obviously, we can, with Marshall, it's just been explosive play after explosive play and not consistency on offense. Everyone's trying to figure out, we'll do more of this later on in the week, how did South Alabama beat Oklahoma State and Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma this past week? Well, it's been a different thing for Oklahoma State. They stopped rotating the quarterbacks and got some sort of running game going, and they've been a different team since basically probably South Alabama kicked their butts. And so Marshall will end up with Georgia Southern at South Alabama and Arkansas State. They got to win 2 of those 3. 2 of them are at home. You got to win the home games. Can't count on winning on the road. You got to win the home games. They get Georgia Southern this weekend. We'll see if they can turn things around. Georgia Southern didn't show up last week on the road to Texas State. So we shall see. All right, time for another timeout. When we come back, we'll talk about Southern Miss and the Fighting Will Halls. All of a sudden, seem to have found some offensive identity. They get their first Sun Belt win, and they're heading west to take on the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. Time to tell you about Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section, and Gametime picks the seats for an average savings of 18%. And with Gametime guarantee, you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We did reach out to a couple of coaches on Monday. Did not hear back to see if they could join us this week on the podcast. So the attempt was made. Got to give people 24 hours to get back to you, do you? Although usually if they want to, they get back to you immediately. So maybe that's a no-go. Oh well, we'll manage. All right, so Southern Miss with a win. Southern Miss was one of those. First of all, they get their first win in the Sun Belt. Only second win on the season. Their only two wins are ULM and Elkhorn State. They're 2-7 overall, 1-5 in the conference. They did jump out to a 17-0 first quarter lead. Feels like they kind of coasted after that. Billy Wiles did not have a particularly good game. 11 out of 23, 200 yards, a touchdown, interception. Frank Gore Jr. did have a good game on 24 carries, 131 yards, and 1 touchdown. So Southern Miss was one of those, I don't know about confounding teams to begin with. It always felt like because of their schedule, right, and their schedule includes, Mississippi State, Tulane, and Florida State, they actually could have finished like 5-7, which I guess they technically still can, but they got to beat Mississippi State, and all of a sudden that may not be the most difficult of all tasks. And certainly would make up for what has happened this season. And that is right before the Egg Bowl. So, although they do finish with Troy, that'll be tough. But I always thought that they could be better this year, but finish with a worse record because of their schedule. That's not been the case this year. They have not played well. All right. They not going to count the game against Florida State, but they really never rebounded from that. Did not show any offense against Tulane. Arkansas State, they showed offense, but then the defense didn't show up. The defense gives up 50 points to Texas State. I mean, they gave up 94 points in 2 ball games. Now, they scored 73. So, of course, against Old Dominion, the defense shows up, giving up only 17, but they only scored 13. And then they did get embarrassed against South Alabama, where the Jaguars, again, can't figure them out, put 55 points up on the board. However, a couple of weeks ago, Will Hall decided to make a change, and he fired the OC. If you don't know, he was the offensive coordinator calling the plays. And he decided, let's hand this off. And I think he delegated it to different staff members, like the O-line coach and the quarterbacks coach. Different guys would coach offense for different games. And it certainly worked offensively against App State. They put up 38 points against App State. Unfortunately, the defense gave up 34 points in the second half, including 20 in the fourth quarter, to watch a 10-point lead turn into a 10-point loss. Nonetheless, that doesn't change the fact they scored 38 points. Billy Wiles, 287 yards on 23 of 41 in that ballgame. Frank Gore, he had 247 yards and a couple of touchdowns. App State had to pull one out at the end. But you can start to see the offense coming around. Now they jumped out to a quick 17-0 lead against ULM, and couldn't quite take advantage of the 4 turnovers that ULM had throughout the ball game. They had one as well. I mean, the numbers for Southern Miss were pretty good. 8 out of 17 on third down. 444 yards total, 238 passing, 206 rushing. Outstanding. Defensively, they were very good. 260 yards total allowed to ULM. Only 73 on the ground. Only 4 penalties. They dominated time of possession, 40 minutes to like 20. All right. And here come the Fighting Will Halls to take on the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. So the Cajuns are down, right? We didn't get a complete answer Although I will stand by my report. I reported for 103.3 that Zeon Chris has a broken fibula. Mike Desimo, head coach of the Cajuns, would not be any more specific than he said he was out for this week's ball game against Southern Miss. So now you're going to Chandler Fields, and he is not your prototypical third-string quarterback, right? He was the starting quarterback for the Raging Cajuns last season. Split time with Ben Woldridge. Then Ben Woldridge took over when Chandler got hurt. Then Ben Woldridge got hurt, and Chandler took over. And he's been the third-string guy. He has not played. I don't think he's played much at all this season. Not at all. Oh, he played a little bit. That would have been UAB, maybe. Played a little bit against UAB. But he hasn't played very much at all, and actually came in and did a pretty good job against Arkansas State when pressed in to service and down 10 on like they own 14, coming on third down, and he got a first down. Let him down the field, but does throw an interception at the end, preventing the Cajuns from pulling within one score. So he's not your prototypical, I haven't seen the field ever as a third-string quarterback, but nonetheless, he is the third-string quarterback. And the Cajuns are going to have to run the football against Southern Miss, and they're going to have to stop the run. If you're Southern Miss and you just saw what Arkansas State did, you're certainly going to try some of that. They're going to try and stop Frank Gore, but I would think that, Southern Miss is like, well, just let's run Frank Gore. Let's make sure we, even if we struggle to begin with, don't stop trying to run Frank Gore. That should be the game plan for Southern Miss, and it should be the game plan for the Cajuns to try and stop Frank Gore. According to head coach Mike Desimo in the press conference, since the OC change, they're they're relying a little bit more on Frank Gore, a junior, obviously. Not talking about the future Hall of Fame dad. So we'll see what happens there. Again, it's a big spread. It was like a double-digit spread to begin with for some reason. And let's see if it changed. I think I saw it came out at 11. I think someone said that. It is. Oh, hold on a second. Let's see here. This game is on national TV. It is on ESPNU. It's down to 10. So I'm pretty sure it was 11. It's down to 10. Wouldn't be surprised if it gets down to about 8. And I wouldn't be surprised if Southern Miss wins this football game. So I would not be surprised. Southern Miss beat them last year in Hattiesburg. So, again, I wouldn't be surprised. Again, things change fast. Things change fast when you are talking injuries. All right. Thanks very much for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Again, we're over 780 subscriptions, audio downloads. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Locked On Sunbelt. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is a big help. Probably not reaching the 1,000 subscriber goal when I wanted to, but we will reach them eventually. And basketball is starting. So we're a little bit inside baseball, so to speak. So we're recording this Monday night. I'm actually on my way to the Raging Cajuns basketball game to see Youngstown State. So we will be able to talk about that later on in the week. And I think Troy beat, I don't even know who the University of Fort Lauderdale is. I lived in Florida for like 6 years. I never even heard of that place. But Troy did get a win. And I think a lot of the Sunbelt teams are playing tonight. So we'll look forward to that as well. I'd send my condolences, but he didn't die. I do feel awful bad for Jalen Green having this spectacular season. Sending our best, I guess, is the way to put that. So sending our best to Jalen Green and to Zeon Chris, a couple of guys that may not see the field again in 2023. All right. Again, I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Thanks so much for watching and listening to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you again on Wednesday.